Welcome to the Wisconsin Podcast. I'm Craig Sauer. On this podcast, we talk Wisconsin things, everything from media, sports, culture, nature, politics, and more. This week, I talk with Johnny Walsh, a Madison lawyer and stand-up comedian. Walsh won the annual Madison's Funniest Comic Contest at the well-regarded comedy club on State. His comedy often reflects on his life and some of the challenges he's faced, including a condition called Usher Syndrome that significantly diminished his vision. It's a topic he addresses head-on in his comedy.
I have a pretty positive attitude towards what has been a very negative part of my life. And if I address the vision, talk about losing most of my sight, and give off the sort of the sunny disposition that I have, I think it eases the audience too. And it allows them to kind of have fun with it the way that I am.
In the interview, Walsh reflects on trying to make his parents laugh, where his jokes come from, and evolving as a comic, from a guy that jumped on stage as a sort of social activity to the guy that treats it like a job today. So, like, by day, you're a lawyer, which is, I'm sure, a challenging job. So why do you want to add like a second job, a second difficult thing on top of that, of being a comedian?
Man, if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be doing both of them right now, I suppose. I went to law school in 2006, graduated in 2009. Once I got settled in my legal career, I think a couple of things happened. I was looking for something else to do other than just work all the time. I'm not sure what all you know about me, but I'm legally blind and wear hearing aids as well. And so I'm somewhat limited in what I can do. For instance, after work, the option of going and playing volleyball or kickball or doing some of those active things that a lot of people do as a hobby, that wasn't really in the cards for me. And so, that's kind of how it started. It was something that the comedy club on State had open mics, and honestly, I just went there. I thought, this seems like a lot of fun. This will be a good outlet outside of the practice of law, and I just went from there.
Did you spend a lot of time there? Like, were you just hanging out at the club a lot, seeing different acts, and then you just open mic? What the hell?
I didn't even know the place existed actually when I was in law school and a little bit afterwards. But a friend of mine took me there, and I saw a couple of shows there. And at the end of the show, they talked about the open mics, and then I started going to the open mics and just observing and listening and seeing what type of, what the quality was at these things. And then from there, there was another open mic in town at the Argus Bar and Grill. That was on Monday nights. And so I went to that one, and that one was a lot less intimidating than the comedy club on State. And yeah, I just wrote a couple of jokes and then did it. I started on August 9th, 2010 was the first time I did it. And then within a year, I was performing. I performed at the Orpheum in front of 2,000 people. So it was an interesting year, that's for sure.
Can you tell me about that first time that year in August when you stepped on a real comedy stage? What was that experience like? Do you remember that one pretty well?
I do. I just remember it was bizarre. I remember what surprised me the most about it was that anybody laughed. I thought there's no way that this is going to go well. It did not go very well. But it was interesting that people laughed. And I remember getting off stage and thinking, Well, of course. I mean, why else would anybody go to a comedy club to listen or to watch comedians than to laugh? I mean, so of course it's going to be a forgiving crowd in that situation. But the first few times I did it, the high of it lasted for days. It was amazing, and I'd only do it for, I get up there for 3 minutes and tell jokes and get a couple of laughs, and then for 2 or 3 days after that, I was excited, happy, motivated. It was a great feeling. I don't know that'll ever come back. I mean, when I do it now, it's so much something that I treat as a job. And, when I get off stage now, it's like my first reaction is, all right, what do I need to do to get better? How do I, improve the jokes and what words do I take out and what words should I add? What jokes should I try again? So now it's definitely more of a process that I work at. Whereas, the first few times I did it, it was just like, whoa, this is awesome. So it's interesting to think about the difference.
How did it feel going up on stage, like the first few times? Were you really nervous about it? I mean, were you like physically, in your stomach kind of churning? I mean, what was kind of the feeling that you had when you were stepping on stage those first few times?
Sheer terror, I would say. I mean, nothing. What? So little can go right, and so much can go wrong. At best, people laugh. Like, that's the best. At worst, that's nobody laughs, but and you're standing up there and you fall off stage. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that was a long time ago. I still get nervous when I get on stage, but it's a different kind of nervous. And the audiences are different, the stages are different, the venues are different. So my expectations are different each time I'm on stage. So, for instance, if I'm working on new material now, my expectation is, all right, get these words out, figure out what the framing of the joke needs to be. If they don't laugh, maybe the joke's not being framed right, but that's okay. So I think, to your question, what was my expectation? The first few times on stage, I had no idea. I had no idea what to expect. Whereas now I have a much better understanding of what the audience is and what the venue is and what the expectations are. And it's also, there's a big difference between when I'm writing new material and trying out new stuff versus working on stuff that I know, or doing stuff that I know works. When I get on stage and I'm doing a set that is tried and true and I know works, my expectation is it's exciting, because especially if it's in an audience I know that hasn't seen me before, and I'm doing jokes that I know work. It's great, because I know where the laughs are going to come. I know what they're going to enjoy, and it's a lot more. It's easier. But when I'm like working on new material, the rush is a little different, because if the new material works, it's a pretty good rush, because it's like, all right, good, I got some new stuff. This is exciting.
What were some of the early bits that you were doing when you were first starting out? Do you remember some of those early ones?
Well, I remember one of the first jokes I told was a joke. Bill Clinton's daughter had just gotten married, and I did a joke about using a Bill Clinton voice. I think that was the first and last time I ever tried an impression on stage. It was a lot of I swore during the first couple of years. I used the F word and some other swear words. I don't swear anymore, but those were used, for a filler, or just to sound, I don't know, a certain way. I was more in the style of Mitch Hedberg. Do you know who that is?
Yep.
He was a comedian. passed away in 2005. A lot of kind of abstract one-liners. So I would tell 10 jokes, none of which would transition from one to the other. So for instance, I'd do a joke about owning a house plant, and then the next joke would be about going to the theater, and then the next joke would be about dating. There was no rhyme or reason. There was a lot of one-liners, whereas now I try to come up with maybe 1 or 2 bits and then have 5 or 6 jokes within those bits, and have the transition be a lot smoother. So I'll be on stage for 10 minutes and it'll feel like I'm telling a story. Whereas I think when I first started, it was just unrelated joke after unrelated joke.
You were mentioning a little bit about trying out new material and kind of suffering through maybe not getting laughs here or trying to figure out where the joke is within the joke when you're on stage. And I'd imagine it's just kind of a grind to do it. In the same way that I think I'm assuming law school is a grind as well. I'm just kind of curious if you think you have to suffer to be good at anything, just in general. Do you have to suffer to be great at what you do?
I think so. I've never really thought of it, but of course, right? It starts when you're born and you're trying to learn how to walk. I have a lot of friends that have toddlers now, and they when they learn how to walk, they're walking around, they look like drunk idiots running into things. I think so. That's an interesting question. I'd be more interested in the person who is great at something right away. Stand-up comedy is interesting because it's not something that you can practice alone. You have to be in front of a crowd in order to try out new material, and then you have to be in front of another different crowd to work on that material. Whereas if you're, if you're Hootie and the Blowfish, you can play Hold My Hand for the rest of your damn life. Granted, that's a great song. No offense to them. I will go and watch Hootie any day of the week. And I'll be just happy hearing that song. But, if you're Jerry Seinfeld, you can't do the same bit in front of the same crowd over and over. So I think there is just inherently going to be a lot of suffering in stand-up comedy. I get my biggest rush now on stage is when I tell a new joke and there's no laughter because it's so obvious. I expected laughter, and the crowd is waiting for me to get to the point. And I'm like, okay, well, I did not expect it to go quite like that. So anyway, that's not the punchline at all. I'm going to come up with a different one next time. I would love to know who's good at something right away. I mean, they call it the practice of law. Mm-hmm. I'm not breaking any ground pointing that out, but the practice of medicine, or your medical practice, I guess is what they call it, law practice. I'm not good at either of those things right now. So, but I'm working on it. I'm practicing.
Speaking of jokes that don't land, is there one that you love that other people just don't get, or one that you're still working on stubbornly that you want to make work that just hasn't been working?
Yeah, I mean, there are ones that I'm working on a bit about the difference between being in your 20s and 30s, and not a lot of people are laughing. And I think, and I like it because I'm 35, and the difference between 35 and 25 is huge.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do the bit now, but what I'm suspecting is that the people I'm practicing it on all happen to be 25, and they don't empathize with me at all. So I'm really waiting for my opportunity when I get in front of a room filled with 40-year-olds who might appreciate the the jokes, that aspect a little more. But there's one joke that I always liked, and I always told it. I would say I went sailing recently, and I was rescued by the DNR recently. And judging from your look of silence, you're probably wondering why anyone ever thought that was funny. I liked it because it was subtle enough, suggesting that I'm not a good sailor and that I had to be rescued by somebody. And I always told that one, and it never got a lot of laughs. And then it kind of dawned on me that one day that, maybe the people in the crowd don't understand what the DNR is. And so I switched it to, I went sailing recently and I was rescued by the Coast Guard recently. And that got a lot more laughs. That was just a reminder to me that a joke is never done. Famous comedians have said that. I mean, I'm still doing premises that I did years ago, but just kind of changed some of the punchlines to make them more fresh or tighter or whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, there are times where I like an idea and I'll just switch a word, and that'll make all the difference for sure.
Many comedians, especially if they're not well known, will kind of introduce themselves by making fun of themselves when they first get on stage. I guess, as sort of a way to build some trust by showing some vulnerability, I guess, to some extent. Do you feel a need to address your vision problems when you at the top of your sets when you first come on stage?
I do, for a lot of reasons. Because, you just don't see people walking around with a white cane very often, if ever. Losing your sight is a rare thing. But I always address it pretty early on and explain, all right, I was not born totally blind. So that's why I understand some of the context behind some of the jokes I'm going to say. Now, I don't say that right. I don't say it like that. I explain what happened. I say, I started losing my sight when I was 15. Here's how, and then go on from there. I do that on purpose for that reason. So people, one, don't think I'm doing like a character that isn't true. I just think it gives the audience context for the rest of my set. So it's important, I think, to do.
Could you give an example of maybe how you would ease into that? Is there like an introductory joke that that you like to use, or that kind of sets the stage for what you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of them. I generally, say something along the lines of, I suppose I should address the elephant in the room. Though if there is an elephant in the room, you've all been remarkably calm right now. And then I talk about my experience in the doctor's office when the doctor told me I was losing my sight. So it just depends on how long my set is going to be. If I'm doing a set in front of a paying audience and I have 10 minutes or whatnot, or 15 minutes or so, I can spend a little more time on it. But if I'm doing sometimes if I'm doing a set at an open mic in front of, Madison comedians, I don't address it then because they all know. But again, it just depends on the stage. The other reason I like to address my vision early is I have a pretty positive attitude towards what has been a very negative part of my life. And so I think if I address the vision, talk about losing most of my sight, and give off the sort of the sunny disposition that I have, I think it eases the audience too. And it allows them to kind of have fun with it the way that I am. I mean, I have a joke about going out on blind dates, and just the fact of me even saying the phrase blind date is funny because I've addressed the vision and I've let the audience know that it's okay to laugh, with me. So that's another reason I do it.
Would you mind maybe explaining the condition that affects your vision?
Not at all. I have Usher Syndrome type 2C, and that's a genetic disorder that causes hearing loss and vision loss. I was born with the hearing loss and fitted with hearing aids within a couple weeks of my birth, which is notable because for two reasons. Number one, all of my baby pictures, I'm wearing a bonnet because as a baby, I would be pulling the hearing aids out of my ear. And so to solve that problem, my brilliant mother felt that I should be wearing a bonnet for the first 3 years of my life. So that's great. Great pictures to show to friends and family for the rest of my life. I look like I was a kid on the Oregon Trail. But the other blessing, though, is that I was fitted with hearing aids within 2 weeks. And so unlike a lot of people born in 1982 with a hearing loss, it just wasn't tested at birth. And so there's a lot of people who weren't blessed to have hearing aids right away, and that affects their speech for the rest of their life. The reason that I was tested right away is because my older brother was born with the same condition, and he did not have hearing aids right away. And so, he spent the first couple of years of his life without hearing aids. It's Usher syndrome. So I was born with a hearing loss, and then when I was 12, 13, 14, I started losing my sight with something that's called retinitis pigmentosa, RP. And what that does is it causes night blindness and then a gradual loss of vision. So from the peripheral to the central vision, it's like macular degeneration, except macular degeneration is central. You lose your central vision and keep some of your peripheral. So I'm down to about 2 or 3 degrees of vision in both my eyes, although in my right eye, it's not very useful vision. It's about 3 degrees, but it's like looking at a cracked mirror or looking through a cracked lens. So it's hard to read out of my right eye, but has only been the case for the last 3 or 4 years. So when I started stand-up comedy, I actually had, to say I had better vision is all relative, but still, it was a little better.
Did it help? You had a brother going through a lot of the same things you had to go through. Did that help you at all? Kind of deal with it?
That's a good question. Actually, he was born with the hearing loss, but the vision loss is not the same. And so I actually have much worse vision than he does. I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa when I was 15. He was not showing any symptoms of the vision loss. He's 5 years older than I am. It really wasn't until recently that he started to have that experience. So it's pretty much just been me. And I never, even to this day, really have met anyone like in my situation. So it's been a learning curve. I think I'm probably better off than my brother because I lost most of my sight early on, and so I was not in a career that I had to adjust to, whereas my brother, is still going through that experience, and I think it's got to be much more difficult to do when you're in your 30s than when you're 15. But that's just my opinion. To that end, though, I had better vision in law school, and if I knew that my vision was going to continue to get as bad as it has, I may have made some different decisions along the way. But here I am, world's best lawyer and comedian.
I had read that your mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis as well at some point. I'm wondering if that taught you anything about how to kind of address or deal with the challenges in your life as well.
Yeah, my mom has MS. She was diagnosed with MS when I was 7, I believe. you know, so that's always been a part of my life. I think the lesson that I took from her more than anything is that if she's incredibly passionate about her family and kind of seeing what makes her happy is the close relationship she has with her friends and her family. And so observing that over the years has shown me how important it is to have those close friends, to develop relationships with your family members. I mean, I don't know what my attitude would be had I not witnessed that. I hope I would be smart enough to have figured that out on my own, but it's certainly something that I've observed in her as a mechanism that I think she's used to deal with the fact that she can't walk. And the best example of that is the fact that when her grandson and granddaughter were born, I don't think I've ever seen her happier in her life than to have those two around. So I know that no matter how hard it's been for her, it's all worth it to her to have her grandkids right here close by. In fact, they live about 7 houses away from her. So I don't think she would change one thing about her life because of those relationships.
Other than the challenges that you kind of saw in your life growing up, what was your childhood like? Were there seeds of comedy brewing in your household growing up?
Oh, my dad! I've watched my dad watch hours of stand-up comedy without laughing at once. The man would not laugh if Richard Pryor, George Carlin, and Jerry Seinfeld were all having dinner at his table. I'm telling you. And the cook was Bozo the Clown. The man his lips wouldn't move. They say he has dry humor. I object. I say he has no humor. My love of stand-up comedy comes from my mother. I mean, she cannot stop laughing once you get her laughing. And that was a problem growing up because of her MS. She would have a difficulty walking, but then if I would tell her a joke or do an impression or something, she'd just fall right on the floor. Oh, no. She'd tell me, she's like, please stop making me laugh. I'm trying to walk. I'm like, this is great. I just tell you a joke and you're down on the floor for 20 minutes. When I was a kid, I would come home from school. I was not quite a bit younger than my siblings, but young enough where they would all be out of the house. And I would come home from school and my mom would be so tired and sick from the day. And that's just what MS does to you. It just drains you. And so she would be laying in bed at around, 3:00 when you'd come home from school. And I would come home and I would just entertain her. This is especially in, I would say, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, probably for about 4 or 5 years. And she'd just be laying in bed and I'd be at the end of the, end of the bed and in the room and just kind of telling her stories about the day and doing impressions of teachers or whatever. And that was, where we had the most belly laughs. And then in high school, I discovered, we could Napster and downloading MP3s. And so I would download a lot of comedy albums and we'd listen to those. Since I couldn't drive, still can't, but, she was driving me around a lot. So we would listen to Mitch Hedberg and old George Carlin, or I was a real fan of Rodney Dangerfield. Although, his comedy, it got a little old sometimes, but I loved it. So I listened to comedy with my mom. That's where it all started. Absolutely.
So does it make sense to your family that that you would end up on stage someday? Is it like, oh yeah, that makes sense, or is it like, are some people in your family surprised that you're actually doing stand-up comedy?
I don't think any of them are surprised at all. No, I not at all. I mean, there was I had an interest in stand-up comedy my whole childhood, my whole life. I did some plays in high school. So no, I don't think so. I always enjoyed public speaking. I take that back. I enjoyed public speaking for a little while, but then as my vision started to change and I had a difficult time reading notes, I got a little more hesitant to do public speaking. But the stand-up comedy has been a real game changer for me as far as public speaking goes, because I've learned how to prepare differently. And so when I do give speeches, I memorize them to some extent. I don't memorize it word for word and don't where I sound like a robot, but I prepare differently. And so I think, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I think when I do public speeches, they're a little different. And I think they're better personally. Anytime somebody reads a speech in front of a crowd, I get just so annoyed, because I get that it is extra work and that public speaking is not the easiest thing in the world, but it's not impossible. Spend some time. And the worst is when people give speeches and they literally look down and they're like, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." I'm like, "You couldn't remember that? Couldn't remember your name?" Look at the audience when you're saying your name. Come on. Next time you watch someone give a speech, you look and see when they're looking down, and you'll think to yourself, really, they couldn't remember their kids' names? They had to read that? Yeah.
I know a couple of years ago you kind of stepped away from comedy for a little bit. Was there a particular reason that you took a break?
Yeah, I wasn't having fun with it anymore. I mean, it was I wasn't really improving as much as I wanted to improve, and I just didn't enjoy it kind of as much as I was in the beginning. And then I also switched jobs. I took a job in private practice that sort of became kind of all encompassing. So it was tough to do an open mic on a Monday night at 10 p.m. and then get up and get to work at 7 a.m. the next day. But, I continued to go to the club. People continued to ask me to do stuff. And I did turn it down generally, but I don't know. I took about a 3-year break. And I just missed it. I missed the feeling of doing something that was uniquely my own, probably more than anything. And I also missed a lot, I think, just making people laugh about something that was so kind of intimate to me, and that, with my life experience. So I started back up in September of 2017 and somehow won a competition within a few months. I had no expectation of winning. And now nobody in the comedy scene likes me because I beat them all.
We'll talk about that. I mean, earlier this year, you won. It's a pretty, well-attended event in Madison. Madison's funniest comic competition at the Comedy Club on State in Madison. Talk about that experience. You had just jumped back into comedy, and you win this competition. That's got to be a huge confidence boost for you. Yeah,
it has. As far as talking about, I'm kidding when I say that. I don't mean to sound like I don't know, but no, it was a wonderful experience. The participants there was a lot of talented participants that worked really hard and continue to work hard, and the club put on a great competition. I lost 10 pounds in 5 weeks due to stress. And I'm not a big guy. It was a wonderful experience. So there's 5 rounds. So to get from the prelims to the final 3, you need 17 minutes of original material. Since I had just started back up in September, I was really only comfortable with about 10 minutes that I was proud of. I mean, I probably have, I don't know, if you put a gun to my head, I could probably entertain you for 30 minutes. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to, I wrote out a 17-minute long set, and I just kind of did put the best jokes first and the worst in minute 16. And I said, they'll kick me out when they see fit. There were 116 people entered. The first cut was 116 down to 40, and then 40 down to 20, and then 20 down to 10, 10 down to 3, and then the winner was announced. So it was 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah. And so in the round of 10, I had to do 7 minutes of material I didn't love. It was some older material I had done when I had first, it started about the practice of law. But I was just happy to be in the top 10, and then I was fortunate to make it out of that. And then in the final round, you can repeat material. And so I was able to do that and go from there. But I was blown away by the level of talent in the round of 20 in the top 10. I mean, I just thought that the comedy club on stage just must be so proud because, they developed all of that talent over the years. They've done a great job harvesting talent, and, to see that round of the top 20, it just, everyone who performed, I thought was great. And the same in the top 10. So it was just a lot of fun to be a part of. I know I sound like a quarterback after he won the big game complimenting his opponents. I get it, but I mean that I'm being sincere. I really did. I mean, when I did the competition in 2011, 2012, I made the top 10 those years, and I can tell you, the comedian that I was in 2011 and 2012 would not have made the top 40. Well, probably would definitely not have made the top 20 this year. It was so much better than it was when I started out, and I was really I was blown away at the talent that showed up.
You kind of feel a responsibility to live up to winning that competition.
Well, I do. I feel a sense of, all right, well, maybe I should be more ambitious. I'm not traveling or anything as a comedian. It's just something I do here in Madison. But, with winning something like that, you get opportunities, and it's up to you. It's up to me to pursue those opportunities. So I think with having the credit of winning this particular competition, I do feel some responsibility that, okay, well, they've given me this opportunity. I should make them proud that they gave me this opportunity. So I'm definitely feeling that for sure.
Where do you want to go with comedy? Do you ever want to make it a full-time thing? If that could work out, could you ever see yourself giving up the law practice to just do comedy full time?
I have an answer to that question. It's just a hard one to say out loud. I don't know the answer to that. Yes. The fact of the matter is, I have 2 degrees of vision, and that's my good eye. So whatever I do, whether it's in the practice of law or stand-up comedy, I need to be responsible about it. I can't drive from gig to gig. I can certainly take a bus, but there's a lot of planning that's involved in that. I think right now I'm just going to try and do the best I can as an attorney and the best I can as a local Madison comic and see what opportunities present themselves. If I had the right guidance and I felt comfortable and thought I could pursue stand-up comedy, that would be my preference. It's not fun going to work every day and trying to navigate statute books with 2 degrees of vision. Now there are ways around that, which I'm learning and I'm adjusting to, and I'm being successful at, that I am proud of. I've worked hard and I have a practice that I'm proud of. And so it would be hard to give that up as well. So it's a really difficult question for me to answer. I'm also, have a great life here in Madison with some great friends and I'm not sure I'd be quick to leave. My parents aren't getting any younger, and I think they enjoy having me around. I don't know. It's hard to tell with my dad sometimes, but to me, there's value in that. I have brunch almost every Sunday with my aunt and uncle, and it's just those things make me happy. But to answer your question, I hate to admit it, but yes, if I could become a touring stand-up comedian, I would certainly pursue that. My first album will be called, it will just be like, fine, I'll do it. That's what my first album will be called. Fine, I'll do it, but you're all driving me there.
Have your parents come out and seen you perform? Have you made your dad laugh?
I have not made him laugh, but I know that he's very proud of me. He was at the final show with the top 3, and he saw me get, he saw the announcement of me winning, and afterwards he came up to me and he said, "I will give you a call at work tomorrow." And he hugged me. Now, it was right after I begged him to hug me, but he still hugged me nonetheless. I was he said, "Get off your knees. Come on." I said, "Oh, okay, we're doing this. Anybody got a camera?" And somebody's like, "Yes, they're on every phone in this room, Johnny." I was like, "Okay, well, good." No, my mom obviously loves it, and she's great to practice stand-up comedy in front of because she can't go anywhere, Every time I call her, she's like, "No, let me sit down before you start talking." My dad, he's always asking, for the YouTube clips so he can send to his friends. And so they're both, they're both very, they love it. They love coming to see me when I perform. They prefer the early show, of course. And for some reason, I can only get them tickets to the 10:30 show. It's a real shame. It's a real shame.
So I can't let you go without asking you the writer question. Tell me about the process of how your jokes and your bits come together. How does that formulate for you?
I don't write anything down. Every comedian has a different method, so whatever I say works for me, it might not work for somebody else. What I do is actually the only thing I do write down is if I'm out with like a friend or something and something funny comes up, maybe I'll write a 1-word thing down. But what I do is I come up with an idea and then I say it out loud over and over until it's kind of like a almost like poetry. It's just repeat. And then I'll practice that at open mics. I'll record my sets. And so if people are laughing at different parts of a new bit, I'll try and figure out, if something something I didn't think was funny, was funny, and then I'll maybe explore that avenue a little more. But it's all, for me, it's all oral. I talk it out and then just refine from there. It's all, I try to use as few words as possible to get to the punchline. As soon as I can shorten the joke enough, then it'll be done for the most part. You can always add tags to it, but yeah, that's how my process is. I've never sat down in front of a computer screen and written something out. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. How much are computers these days?
Depends. Fun talking to Johnny. Keep an eye on the listings for the Comedy Club on State, and you can likely catch him there in the near future. Make sure to subscribe to the Wisconsin Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. You can also stay in the loop about the pod by visiting wispod.com and following the show on Twitter at WisPodcast and on Facebook at the Wisconsin Podcast. Cheers.